I watched my 16-year-old son shove a spade into the wet earth, his tears mixing with the mud, while the woman I had loved for 20 years stood 10 feet away, sipping wine from a plastic cup. I wasn't looking at the gun pointed at my head. I wasn't looking at the bruises forming on my son's arms. I was staring at my wife, Morgan. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming for them to stop. She checked her watch and sighed, looking annoyed that burying her family was taking so long. That was the moment the loving husband died, and the monster I used to be woke up. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The smell of the woods usually brought me peace. I used to take Evan camping out here when he was just a little guy, teaching him how to fish in the creek and how to build a fire. But tonight, the woods just smelled like rot and damp earth. The rain had stopped an hour ago, leaving everything slick and cold. My knees were sinking into the mud. My hands were zip-tied behind my back, so tight I had lost feeling in my fingers 20 minutes ago. But the physical pain was nothing. It was a distant buzz, like a fly in the room. The real pain, the agony that felt like it was ripping my chest open, was watching Evan. "Harder, kid," a voice growled. That was Dominic. He was wearing a suit that cost more than my truck, but out here in the dark, he just looked like filth. He was leaning against a tree, smoking a cigar, watching my boy struggle with the shovel. I can't," Evan sobbed, his voice cracking. He was shivering, his school hoodie soaked through. He looked at me, his eyes wide and terrified. "Dad, please. Tell them we didn't see anything." I tried to speak, but my jaw was swollen shut from where Dominic's enforcer, a giant named Ryder, had introduced me to the butt of his rifle. I spat out a mouthful of blood and forced myself to look at Evan with steady eyes. I needed him to see that I wasn't afraid. If he saw fear in me, he would break. "Keep digging, Evan," I managed to rasp out. My voice sounded like gravel. "Just do what they say. Listen to your father." A soft, feminine voice drifted through the clearing. And there she was, Morgan. She stepped into the light of the truck's high beams. She was wearing her trench coat, the beige one I bought her for our anniversary last year. Her hair was perfect. Her makeup wasn't even smudged. She looked like she was waiting for a bus, not supervising the execution of her husband and child. "Morgan," I whispered. It wasn't a plea. It was just a confirmation. She didn't even look at me. She walked over to Dominic and leaned into him. He wrapped a thick arm around her waist and kissed her on the forehead. The intimacy of it made my stomach turn. It wasn't just that they were together. It was the comfort. They had done this before. They had been together a long time. "This is taking forever, Dom," she said, shivering slightly. "I have a Zoom meeting at 8 in the morning. Can we hurry this up?" Dominic laughed, a low, rumbling sound. "Relax, babe. The kid is almost deep enough. You want to say goodbye to your hubby? Last chance." Morgan finally turned her eyes to me. For 2 decades, those eyes had been my home. I had left the military, left the classified ops, left the violence and the blood, all for those blue eyes. I became a construction manager. I built houses. I coached Little League. I became boring, safe, and soft. I did it all for her. And now, looking at her, I saw absolutely nothing. No regret. No sadness. Just cold calculation. "You shouldn't have come home early, Hunter," she said, her voice flat. "You were supposed to be at the site until 6. If you had just followed your routine, Evan wouldn't be here. This is your fault." My fault. She was laundering money. That's what I had found earlier that afternoon. I had come home to surprise her with lunch and found a laptop open on the kitchen island. Accounts, transfers, names of shell companies. I didn't understand it at first. When I asked her about it, she didn't panic. She just smiled, poured me a coffee, and texted someone. 10 minutes later, Dominic and his crew kicked down our front door. "You sold us out," I said, the realization hitting me harder than any bullet. "For what?" "Money. It's not just money, Hunter," she sneered, walking closer, staying just out of kicking range. She knew I could handle myself in a bar fight, but she had no idea who I really was. To her, I was just Hunter the Builder. She didn't know about Sergeant Hunter, the ghost of Kandahar. She didn't know that the U.S. government spent $3 million training me to be a weapon. It's the lifestyle, she continued. You're happy with beer and burgers. I wanted more. Dominic gives me more. And let's be honest, you're boring. You've always been so simple. Simple. I closed my eyes for a second. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of the wet pine. Assessed the situation, a voice in my head said. It wasn't my voice. It was my old drill sergeant. For hostiles. One civilian asset, Evan. Terrain, soft mud, poor traction. Lighting, directional from the vehicle, plenty of shadows. I opened my eyes. I wasn't looking at Morgan anymore. I was looking at the geometry of the kill zone. Ryder was standing 4 feet to my left, holding an AR-15 loosely. He was confident, arrogant. He thought I was a beaten dog. Another guard, a skinny guy named Felix, was near the truck, scrolling on his phone. Dominic had a pistol tucked in his belt, not drawn. And Morgan was the distraction. I'm done, Evan cried out, dropping the shovel. He fell to his knees in the dirt. I dug it. I dug the hole. Please, Mom. Mom, please don't let them hurt us. Morgan looked at her son, her only child, the boy she nursed through the flu, the boy she cheered for at soccer games. She took a sip of her wine and turned away. Do it, Dom, make it quick. Dominic chuckled and pulled the pistol from his waistband. He racked the slide. The metallic clack-clack echoed in the silent woods. He walked over to the edge of the grave, looking down at Evan. Stand up, kid, Dominic ordered. Face the hole. Evan screamed. It was a high, primal sound of pure terror. No, I roared, struggling against the zip ties. Ryder stepped in and kicked me in the ribs. I felt something crack. The pain was sharp, blinding. I fell onto my side in the mud. Stay down, old man, Ryder spat. I lay there, my face pressed against the cold ground. I could see Evan shaking. Dominic raised the gun. Time to say goodnight, Dominic said. I didn't have a choice anymore. The quiet life was over. The mask had to come off. I focused on my right hand, specifically my thumb. In the military, they taught us how to escape restraints. It's not magic. It's physics and pain tolerance. You have to make your hand smaller than your wrist. I took a breath, clenched my jaw, and pulled. A sickening pop vibrated up my arm as I dislocated my own thumb joint. The pain was white-hot, blinding, nauseating. I bit my tongue to keep from screaming, tasting fresh copper in my mouth. But the joint slid out of the socket. My hand was limp, narrow, slippery with rain and sweat. My right hand slid through the plastic loop of the zip tie. I was free. Ryder didn't notice. He was too busy watching Dominic, grinning, waiting for the execution. He was standing right next to me. I didn't stand up. I didn't make a speech. I moved with the speed of a striking cobra. My left hand snatched Ryder's ankle, yanking it out from under him. He hit the mud with a heavy thud, the air rushing out of his lungs. Before he could even gasp, I was on top of him. I didn't punch him. Punching hurts your hands. I drove my elbow down into his throat. There was a crunch of cartilage. Ryder made a choking, gurgling sound and went limp. I grabbed the AR-15 from his twitching hands. Hey, Felix yelled from the truck, dropping his phone. Dominic spun around, the pistol still aimed at Evan. But I was already moving. I wasn't Hunter anymore. I was the Reaper. I rolled into a crouch, bringing the rifle up. The world slowed down. I could see the raindrops falling in front of the headlights. I could see the widening of Dominic's eyes. I could see Morgan dropping her wine cup, the red liquid splashing onto her beige coat. Get down, Evan, I screamed. Evan dropped into the hole he had just dug. Dominic fired. The bullet whizzed past my ear, taking a chunk of bark off the tree behind me. I squeezed the trigger. Pop, pop. 2 shots. Controlled. Precise. The headlights on the truck shattered, plunging the clearing into near-total darkness. He's got a gun, Dominic screamed, his voice cracking with panic. Kill him. Kill him now. I rolled to the left, vanishing into the shadows of the tree line. The darkness was my friend. I had lived in the dark for 10 years before I met Morgan. I knew how to move in it. I knew how to hunt in it. They were firing blindly now, bullets chewing up the mud where I had been standing a second ago. I watched them from behind a thick oak tree. I could hear Morgan screaming, a high-pitched wail of terror. "My coat! You ruined my coat!" she shrieked, oblivious to the fact that people were shooting to kill. I checked the magazine in the rifle. Half full. My thumb was throbbing, useless and dangling. I grabbed it with my left hand and yanked it back into place. The snap made me see stars, but I needed the grip. I looked toward the grave. Evan was down there, safe from the gunfire for the moment, but terrified. I had to get him out. But to get him out, I had to take them apart. Dominic, Felix, and whoever else was in the truck were about to learn a very hard lesson. They thought they were torturing a construction worker. They didn't know they had just unleashed a war machine. I took a breath, leveled the rifle, and stepped back into the rain. The darkness I had created by shooting out the headlights was absolute. To them, it was a blindfold. To me, it was a blanket. I didn't need to see clearly to know where they were. I could hear the panic in their breathing and the frantic splashing of their boots in the mud. "I can't see anything." Felix screamed, his voice cracking. He fired 3 more shots into the trees, the muzzle flashes illuminating the terror on his face for split seconds. He was shooting at shadows, wasting ammunition on ghosts. I moved low, sliding through the wet brush like oil. My ribs screamed with every twist of my torso, a sharp, grinding pain that told me Ryder's kick had done real damage. But pain is just information. It told me I was alive. It told me I had to move faster. I wasn't trying to kill them all. Not yet. Killing 4 people, even scumbags like this, creates a mess that brings federal heat. My priority was the asset, Evan. I circled around the perimeter of the clearing, keeping the large oak trees between me and their guns. I reached the mound of dirt Evan had been forced to dig out. He was curled in a ball at the bottom of the grave, his hands over his head, sobbing quietly. I slid into the hole next to him. He flinched violently, letting out a stifled yelp. "Shoo," I whispered, pressing my hand gently over his mouth. My hand was covered in mud and Ryder's blood, but I tried to be soft. "It's me. It's Dad." Evan's eyes were wide, white circles in the gloom. He was shaking so hard his teeth were chattering. He looked at the rifle in my hand, then up at my face. He didn't recognize me. The dad he knew worried about mortgage rates and football scores. The man staring back at him now had eyes made of stone. "We have to move," I whispered, my mouth right next to his ear. "When I say go, you scramble out of this hole and run toward the creek. Do not stop. Do not look back. Do you understand?" He nodded, tears streaming down his dirty cheeks. Above us, Dominic was losing his mind. "Find him. He's a construction worker, for crying out loud. He's not Batman. Find him and put a bullet in his head." "Dom, let's just go." Morgan's voice cut through the rain. She sounded angry, not scared. "Leave them. If he's alive, he'll go to the cops. We need to clear the accounts and leave the country tonight." Hearing her voice, so pragmatic, so cold, ignited a fire in my gut that threatened to burn me alive. She was already planning her exit strategy. She wasn't worried about whether I lived or died. She was worried about her bank balance. I peeked over the edge of the dirt mound. Ryder was groaning on the ground, trying to stand up. Felix was reloading his pistol near the truck. Dominic was spinning in circles, aiming at nothing. "Go," I hissed to Evan. I boosted him up. He scrambled out of the mud, slipping once, then finding traction. As soon as his silhouette broke the horizon, Felix saw him. "There!" Felix yelled, raising his gun. I didn't hesitate. I popped up from the hole, shouldered the AR-15, and fired. I didn't aim for Felix's chest. I aimed for his thigh. Crack! Felix screamed and dropped like a sack of potatoes, clutching his leg. The gun fell from his hand. Dominic spun toward the muzzle flash, firing blindly. His bullets thudded into the dirt inches from my face, spraying mud into my eyes. I didn't return fire. I had bought the distraction. I rolled backward out of the hole, keeping low, and sprinted into the tree line after Evan. "Run, Evan! Run!" I roared, abandoning stealth for speed. We tore through the underbrush. Branches whipped my face, leaving stinging welts, but I didn't feel them. I caught up to Evan near the creek bed. He was stumbling, his breathing coming in ragged, wheezing gasps. He wasn't built for this. He was a varsity swimmer, fit and strong, but he wasn't conditioned for survival running. I grabbed his arm, pulling him upright. "Don't stop. Cross the water." "Dad, my shoe." "I lost my shoe," he gasped. "Leave it," I ordered. "Move." We splashed through the icy water of the creek. The cold soaked into my boots, numbing my toes instantly. We scrambled up the opposite bank, slipping on wet moss. Behind us, the shouting was fading, but I could hear the roar of the truck engine starting. They were going to try to cut us off at the main road. "We aren't going to the road," I said, reading the situation. "We're heading to the ridge." "The ridge?" Evan panted. That's 5 miles away." "Dad, I can't." "You can't?" I said, my voice hard. "Because if you don't, they will kill you. And I won't let that happen. Now move." We ran for what felt like hours. The rain stopped, leaving the forest dripping and silent. The adrenaline began to fade, and the pain came rushing back like a tidal wave. My thumb throbbed with a sickening, deep ache. My ribs felt like they were grinding together with every breath. But I kept a steady pace, pushing Evan forward, stopping every few minutes to listen for pursuit. We were ghosts now. We left no trail. I guided us over rocky patches to hide our footprints and through dense pine thickets where no vehicle could follow. By the time we reached the old logging road near the ridge, the moon had broken through the clouds. Evan collapsed against a tree, sliding down until he hit the pine needles. He was done. He had nothing left. I crouched next to him, scanning the darkness. We were safe for the moment. "Dad?" Evan whispered. He didn't look at me. He was staring at his hands, which were caked in the dirt from his own grave. "Mom." She was there. She watched. I closed my eyes for a second, the image of Morgan sipping her wine searing into my brain. "I know, son." "Why?" he asked, his voice breaking into a sob. "Why did she do that?" "Because she's sick." I lied. It wasn't the truth. Morgan wasn't sick, she was evil, but I couldn't tell him that yet. "We're going to fix this." "How?" He looked up at me, and for the first time, he really looked at me. He saw the way I held the rifle, relaxed, ready, familiar. He saw the lack of panic in my eyes. "Dad, who are you? You took down Ryder. You shot Felix. You moved like a movie character." I looked down at the rifle in my hands. I ejected the magazine, checked the count, and slammed it back in. The sound was loud in the quiet night. "I used to have a different job, Evan. Before I met your mother. Before you were born." "You said you were in logistics," he said, confused. "You said you drove trucks in the Army." "I didn't drive trucks," I said softly. "I removed problems." I stood up and offered him a hand. "Come on. We have 1 more mile. I have a place nearby. Nobody knows about it. Not even your mother." I led him up the steep incline of the ridge. Years ago, when I first felt the itch of paranoia, a remnant of my old life, I had purchased a small plot of land under the name Grant. It was just a few acres of rocky, useless hillside, but on it sat an old, rusted storm shelter from the 1950s. I cleared the brush away from the heavy steel hatch. It groaned as I hauled it open, revealing a dark, concrete staircase descending into the earth. "Get in," I said. Evan hesitated, looking into the black hole. "Is it safe?" "It's the safest place in the world right now." We descended. I pulled the hatch shut and locked it from the inside. I clicked on a battery-powered lantern I had left there 3 years ago. The beam cut through the stale, dusty air. The bunker was small, just a concrete box, but along the walls were shelves. They weren't filled with family photos or tools. They were lined with MREs, gallons of water, encrypted radio equipment, and a lockbox containing the tools of my former trade. I sat Evan down on a cot and grabbed a first aid kit. I started cleaning the cuts on his arms. He sat in stunned silence, looking around the room. Is this? He pointed to a Kevlar vest hanging on the wall. Is this yours? Yes, I said, wrapping gauze around his wrist. Are we going to the police? He asked. I paused. The police? Dominic owned half the precinct. If we went to the cops now, we'd be dead within the hour. And Morgan, she knew that. That's why she was so calm. She knew the system was rigged in her favor. No police, I said, my voice dropping an octave. I walked over to the lockbox and dialed in the combination. The tumblers clicked, a sound of finality. I opened the lid. Inside sat a laptop, a stack of cash, and a dossier I had kept on the local crime syndicates, just in case. Then what are we going to do? Evan asked, his voice trembling. I turned to him. The soft, suburban dad was gone. The man standing in the bunker was the man the military had sent to the darkest corners of the world to silence monsters. We're going to rest, I said, and then we're going to take them apart, piece by piece. I looked at the laptop. I needed to know exactly how deep Morgan's betrayal went. I needed to see the numbers. The heartbreak was a heavy stone in my chest, but I pushed it aside. I couldn't afford to grieve my marriage. I had a war to win. The only light in the bunker came from the blue glow of my encrypted laptop screen. The hum of the hard drive was the only sound, competing with the ragged breathing of my son, Evan, who had finally passed out on the cot from sheer exhaustion. I sat at the small metal desk, a bottle of rubbing alcohol and a roll of duct tape next to me. I had taped my ribs tight. It hurt to breathe, but it would hurt more if I moved the wrong way and a bone punctured a lung. Pain was just a signal. I turned the signal down and focused on the screen. I hadn't touched this computer in 6 years. When I left the service, I swore I was done with intel, surveillance, and hacking. I wanted to be a husband. I wanted to be a dad who grilled burgers on Sundays. But the paranoid part of my brain, the part that kept me alive in deserts and jungles, never really slept. It made me install a keylogger on our home network. I never checked it. I thought it was a betrayal of trust to spy on my wife. Now, sitting in this concrete box while my son slept with dried mud on his face, I realized the real betrayal was trusting her at all. My fingers flew across the keyboard, bypassing the standard firewalls of Morgan's bank accounts. I didn't need her password. I just needed the backdoor I had built into our router years ago for security. Files began to populate the screen. Emails, bank transfers, chat logs. My heart felt like a stone sinking into a frozen lake. It wasn't just a one-time thing. It wasn't a mistake. Morgan wasn't forced into this. I opened a folder dated 3 years ago. It contained PDFs of shell companies in the Cayman Islands. The names on the documents were fake, but the digital signature was hers. She had been moving money for Dominic for years. While I was at work, while I was driving Evan to practice, she was laundering millions of dollars in drug money through her branch. I clicked on a chat thread from 2 days ago. The username was simply King, which I assumed was Dominic. King, the audit is coming. The feds are sniffing around the ledger. Morgan, I know. I have a fix. King, what kind of fix? Morgan, a scapegoat. Hunter signed the joint tax returns without reading them. I moved the debt to his name. If he disappears, the investigation dies with him. It looks like he stole the money and ran. King disappears. Morgan, he has an accident. Tonight. Evan too. The boy saw the transfer logs on my iPad. He's a liability. I stopped reading. I felt the bile rise in my throat. Liability. She didn't call him her son. She called him a liability. I looked over at Evan. He was twitching in his sleep, probably dreaming about the grave. She had signed his death warrant over a text message, probably while drinking her morning coffee. The woman I held at night. The woman I vowed to protect. She was a monster wrapped in a beige trench coat. I closed my eyes, forcing the image of her face out of my mind. I couldn't afford to be heartbroken. Heartbreak makes you slow. Anger makes you sloppy. I needed to be cold. I needed to be the reaper. I opened a new window. If Morgan was the brains, Dominic was the muscle. But every muscle has a weak point. I pulled up the schematic of Dominic's operations. I had gathered this intel years ago when we first moved to the city, just to make sure the neighborhood was safe. I knew he ran a nightclub downtown called the Velvet Room and a shipping company by the docks. The shipping company was the vein. The money was the blood. If I wanted to kill the beast, I had to bleed it out first. Dad. Evan's voice was small, cracking the silence. I spun around in the chair. He was sitting up, clutching the thin wool blanket to his chest. His eyes were red, swollen. Hey, I said, softening my voice. How are you feeling? Like I got hit by a truck, he whispered. He looked at the screen. What are you doing? Finding out why, I said. I wasn't going to lie to him anymore. He was in the trenches now. He deserved the truth. Was it really Mom? He asked, the hope in his voice painful to hear. He wanted me to say no. He wanted me to say she was brainwashed, or kidnapped, or forced. I turned the laptop screen toward him. I pointed to the message. He's a liability. Evan read it. I watched his face crumble. He didn't cry this time. He just went pale. Something in his eyes hardened. The innocence was dying, replaced by the same cold survival instinct that ran in my blood. She wanted us dead, Evan stated flatly. Yes. So she could keep the money. Yes. Evan looked down at his hands. What do we do now? We can't go home. We can't go to the cops. We don't need the cops, I said, standing up. I walked over to the metal locker in the corner of the room. I spun the combination lock and pulled the handle. The door swung open with a heavy creak. Inside, hanging on the rack, was my past. A matte black tactical vest, a suppressed pistol, a combat knife with a serrated edge, and a long-range sniper rifle that I hadn't fired since the mountains of Afghanistan. Evan stared at the gear. You kept all this. Better to have it and not need it, I said, pulling the vest off the hanger. I slipped it over my head. The weight of it felt familiar. It felt like my real skin. I tightened the straps around my ribs, the pressure actually helping to stabilize the fracture. I'm going out, I said. What? No. Evan jumped up. You can't leave me here. You are safer in this room than anywhere else on Earth, I told him firmly. This door is reinforced steel. There is enough food and water for a month. The ventilation system is filtered. No one gets in unless you open it. Where are you going? He asked, his voice trembling again. I checked the slide on the pistol and holstered it. I looked at my son. I didn't see a victim anymore. I saw the reason I had to finish this. They took our life, Evan. They took our home. They tried to put you in the ground. I grabbed a set of keys from the desk. I'm going to remind them why you don't poke a sleeping bear. You're going to kill them? I'm going to destroy them, I corrected. Death is too easy. They care about money. I'll burn it. They care about power. I'll strip it away. By the time I'm done, they'll wish I had just killed them. I walked to the door. Lock it behind me. Don't open it for anyone but me. If I'm not back in 6 hours, you open the red envelope in the safe. It has a passport and a plane ticket. You leave. You go to the address in Berlin. Do you understand? Evan stared at me for a long moment. He swallowed hard, then nodded. I understand. Be careful, Dad. Careful is for people who have something to lose, I said. I've already lost it. I stepped out into the cool night air. The rain had stopped, but the world was still wet and dark. I climbed onto the old dirt bike I had stashed under a tarp near the entrance, another contingency plan I hoped I'd never use. I kicked the engine to life. It sputtered, then roared. I wasn't going back to the woods. I wasn't going to the house. I was going to the bank. Morgan was the manager of the First City Bank downtown. That's where the servers were. That's where the physical ledgers were kept in the safe deposit boxes. If I wanted to dismantle her life, I had to start at her throne. I revved the engine and tore down the logging road, the wind biting my face. The construction worker was gone. The assassin was back on the clock. The First City Bank building was a monolith of glass and steel, rising out of the downtown concrete like a tombstone. At 3 a.m., The streets were dead. A street sweeper hummed in the distance, but otherwise, the city slept. I parked the bike 3 blocks away in an alley behind a dumpster. I didn't walk to the front door. I walked to the service entrance in the loading dock. I knew this door. I knew it because 2 years ago, Morgan had forgotten her keys, and I had driven down here to bring them to her. I remembered the brand of the keypad, Securtex. Standard encryption. Child's play. I pulled a small decoder from my vest, a relic from a mission in Beirut. I clamped it over the panel. The numbers cycled rapidly on the small LCD screen, a blur of green light. For seconds later, the lock clicked. Beep. I slipped inside, closing the heavy steel door behind me. I moved through the shadows of the hallway, avoiding the cameras. I didn't need to hack them. I just needed to stay in their blind spots. I knew the layout. Morgan had bragged about the state-of-the-art security upgrade last Christmas. She didn't know she was explaining the grid to a man who used to breach embassies. I reached the executive floor. The carpet was plush, swallowing the sound of my boots. The air smelled of lemon polish and stale coffee. I stopped in front of the office door with the gold plaque, Morgan, branch manager. My hand hovered over the handle. For a second, my chest tightened. This was her world. This was where she came every day while I was pouring concrete. This was where she built an empire on lies while I built a life on trust. I pushed the door open. Her office was pristine. A large mahogany desk, a view of the city skyline, and a shelf of awards. But what caught my eye was the picture frame on her desk. It was a photo of us, me, Morgan, and Evan, at the beach 3 summers ago. We looked happy. I picked up the frame. I looked at my own smiling face. I looked at the woman who had watched me digging my own grave just hours ago. I smashed the glass against the edge of the desk. The sound was a sharp crack in the silence. I pulled the photo out, crumpled it in my fist, and dropped it into the trash can. Focus. I sat in her leather chair and booted up her terminal. The blue light washed over my face. I inserted a flash drive into the port. Time to burn it down, I whispered. I wasn't just stealing data. I was planting a virus. I uploaded a script that would flag every single transaction from Dominic's shell companies as suspicious activity level 5, the highest tier of federal alert. It would freeze the assets instantly. It would trigger an automatic report to the IRS and the FBI. By the time Morgan woke up to her artisanal espresso, her accounts would be locked and federal agents would be printing subpoenas. But I wasn't done. I needed the physical insurance. I turned to the safe behind her painting. A cliché, but Morgan wasn't creative. She was just greedy. I drilled the lock. It took 3 minutes of grinding noise that set my teeth on edge, but the mechanism finally gave way. Inside, stacked neatly, were the real books. The black ledgers. The paper trail that proved she wasn't just laundering money. She was financing Dominic's drug shipments. I grabbed the ledgers and stuffed them into my pack. Suddenly, the radio on my vest crackled to life. I had tuned it to the local security frequency. Unit 4 to base. I heard a noise on the 3rd floor. Executive suites. Checking it out. A night guard. I checked my watch. I had stayed too long. The emotional detour with the photo had cost me 40 seconds. In my old life, 40 seconds was the difference between extraction and a body bag. I stood up, slinging the pack over my shoulder. I moved to the door, pressing my back against the wall next to the frame. Footsteps. Heavy, rhythmic. A flashlight beam swept under the crack of the door. The handle turned. The door swung open. The guard, a burly guy in his 40s, stepped in, his flashlight sweeping the room. The beam hit the broken picture frame on the desk. "What the?" he muttered, reaching for his radio. I moved. I stepped out from behind the door and kicked the back of his knee. He buckled instantly. Before he could shout, I had him in a chokehold. I didn't squeeze hard enough to kill, just enough to cut the oxygen. "Sleep," I whispered. He struggled for 3 seconds, clawing at my arm, then went limp. I lowered him gently to the carpet. I checked his pulse, strong and steady. He'd wake up with a headache, nothing more. I looked at Morgan's desk one last time. I needed her to know. I needed her to know it wasn't a random burglary. I needed her to know I was coming. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. A simple gold band I had worn for 18 years. It felt heavy in my hand. I placed the ring in the center of her desk, right where the picture used to be. I turned and vanished into the hallway. 2 hours later, I was perched on the roof of a warehouse across from the Velvet Room, Dominic's nightclub. The sun was starting to bleed gray light over the horizon. My phone buzzed. It was an alert from the bank system I had mirrored. Alert. Assets frozen. Federal audit initiated. I watched the entrance of the club. A black SUV screeched to a halt in front. Dominic jumped out, still wearing the same suit from the woods, looking disheveled and frantic. A moment later, a taxi pulled up. Morgan stepped out. She wasn't perfectly put together this time. Her hair was messy, her trench coat buttoned wrong. She was holding her phone, screaming into it. I raised the sniper scope, looking through the glass. I wasn't going to shoot. Not yet. I wanted to see the fear. I zoomed in on Morgan's face. She was pale. She was shaking. She looked at Dominic, and even from 200 yards away, I could see the accusation in her eyes. She thought he had messed up. She didn't know about the ring yet. Dominic grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the club entrance. She yanked away, shoving him. Good, I thought. Let them turn on each other. They disappeared inside. The paranoia was setting in. They had lost the money. Now, they were going to lose their trust. I packed up the rifle. This was just the opening move. I had taken their shield. Now, I was going to take their sword. I needed to find out who their supplier was. I needed to find the man Dominic was afraid of. I slipped down the fire escape, melting back into the city. The dead husband was very much alive, and he was just getting started. The sun was fully up now, casting long, sharp shadows across the industrial district. I wasn't tired. My body had switched into a different metabolic state, one I hadn't felt since my last deployment. The fatigue was there, but it was buried under layers of cortisol and focus. I was tracking Kyle. Kyle was one of Dominic's lieutenants. I remembered him from the woods. He was the one driving the truck. He was sloppy, loud, and currently, he was pacing outside the back entrance of the Velvet Room, smoking a cigarette with a shaking hand. He looked like a man who knew the walls were closing in. I watched him from the cab of a stolen utility van parked down the street. When Kyle finally threw his cigarette butt into a puddle and walked toward his car, a flashy red sports coupe, I made my move. I didn't run. I walked with purpose. As he unlocked his door, I was already behind him. Don't turn around, I said. My voice was low, pressed right against his ear. I jammed the barrel of my suppressed pistol into his kidney. Get in the car, Kyle. You're driving. Kyle froze. Who is this? Look, if you want cash, drive, I ordered, shoving him into the driver's seat. I slid into the back, keeping the gun trained on the back of his headrest. Go to the shipyard. Pier 4. And if you touch your phone, I'll put a bullet in your spine before you can unlock the screen. Kyle drove. He was sweating so much I could smell it. He kept glancing in the rearview mirror, trying to see my face, but I stayed in the blind spot. You're the husband, Kyle stammered as we turned onto the coastal highway. Dominic said you were dead. He said you ran. Dominic says a lot of things, I replied calmly. Park behind the containers. He pulled the car into the maze of shipping containers at Pier 4. It was desolate. Perfect. Get out. Kyle scrambled out of the car. He was a young kid, maybe 25, trying to play gangster. Now that he was facing a real killer, the act crumbled. He backed up until he hit the cold steel of a blue container. Please, he begged, raising his hands. I didn't shoot at you. That was Felix. I just drove the truck. I don't care about the truck, I said, holstering the gun. I didn't need it for him. I needed answers. I want to know about the shipment coming in tonight. And I want to know where Dominic is hiding the rest of the money. Kyle laughed nervously. It was a hysterical, broken sound. The money? You think Dominic has the money? He's the boss, I said, stepping closer. Dominic. Kyle shook his head, his eyes wide with disbelief. Dominic isn't the boss. He's just the face. He's the muscle. He takes orders just like the rest of us. I stopped. This wasn't what I expected. Dominic walked around like he owned the city. If Dominic isn't the boss, I asked slowly, then who is? Kyle hesitated. He looked terrified, more terrified of answering me than he was of my gun. I can't. She'll kill me. She's worse than him. She plans everything. The routes, the laundering, the hits. She. The word hung in the salty air like a poisonous fog. My blood ran cold. A specific, sickening realization started to form in my gut. Who is she, Kyle? I grabbed him by the collar of his expensive leather jacket and slammed him against the container. Give me a name. It's your wife. Kyle screamed. It's Morgan. I froze. My grip on his jacket loosened slightly. You're lying. I swear. Kyle was crying now, snot running down his face. Dominic is just her puppet. Morgan set up the network years ago before she even met him. She uses the bank to wash the cash, and she uses Dominic to move the product. She's the one who ordered the hit on you. Dominic wanted to just pay you off to leave, but Morgan said no. The world tilted on its axis. It wasn't just greed. It wasn't just a cheating wife running away with a criminal. Morgan was the criminal. Why? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Why her own son? Kyle looked down, trembling. The kid. Evan. He saw the ledger on her iPad. Morgan told us he was a liability. She said he was soft, and he would break under questioning. She ordered the cleanup. She told Dominic to make them dig the graves so there wouldn't be any evidence left behind. I let go of Kyle. He slid down the side of the container, sobbing into his hands. I staggered back a step. I felt like I had been punched in the chest. For 18 years, I thought I was the protector. I thought I was the dangerous one shielding my innocent wife from the harsh realities of the world. But the whole time, I was sleeping next to the devil. She didn't just betray me. She didn't just cheat on me. She looked at our son, the boy she gave birth to, and decided he was a business expense to be liquidated. The sadness inside me vanished. It was incinerated instantly. In its place, a cold, dark star was born. I looked at Kyle. Is she with Dominic now? Yeah, Kyle sniffled. They're at the safe house. The penthouse at the Spire. She's trying to salvage the accounts you froze. The Spire, I repeated. I turned away from him. Wait. Kyle called out. What are you going to do? Are you going to kill me? I looked back at him over my shoulder. No, you're not worth the bullet. But if you call them, if you warn them, I will find you. And next time, I won't be asking questions. I walked back to the van. My hands were steady, but my mind was a storm. Morgan was the architect. She was the target. Dominic was just a pawn. I had been playing the game wrong. I was trying to hurt her feelings. I was trying to ruin her finances. But you don't fight a warlord with tax audits. You fight them by cutting off the head. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number for the bunker. Dad. Evan's voice answered on the first ring. He sounded scared. I'm coming back, I said. Pack the gear. What did you find? He asked. I found the truth, I said, starting the engine. And it's worse than we thought. Morgan isn't just helping them, Evan. She is them. There was silence on the other end. Then, a small, hard voice spoke. Then stop her. I will, I promised. I drove away from the docks. The game had changed. It wasn't a rescue mission anymore. It wasn't a revenge story. It was an assassination contract. And for the first time in my life, the target was my own wife. Trust is a luxury honest people can afford. In the criminal world, trust is just a timer waiting to hit zero. I knew Morgan better than anyone. Or at least, I thought I did. But I knew one thing for certain. She was a survivalist. If the ship was sinking, she wouldn't just steal the life raft. She would shoot anyone else trying to get on board. I just needed Dominic to realize he wasn't the captain. He was the anchor. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. Back inside the bunker, the air was heavy. Evan sat on the cot, staring at the concrete wall. I had just told him the truth, that his mother wasn't a victim, but the architect of our destruction. He didn't cry. He didn't scream. He just sat there, turning a loose thread on his blanket over and over again. "She's leaving," I said, breaking the silence. I was standing at the laptop, the blue light reflecting in my eyes. I found a flight manifest in her hidden cloud drive. One ticket, one way to Zurich. It leaves tonight at 11 p.m. Evan looked up. "Just one ticket? Just one?" I confirmed. "She's cutting Dominic loose. She's going to let him take the fall for the bank fraud, for the drugs, and for our murder. So let her go," Evan said, his voice hollow. "Let her leave. We survive. Isn't that enough?" I walked over and placed a hand on his shoulder. He flinched slightly, a reflex from the trauma, but then relaxed. "If she leaves, she wins. She disappears with millions, and we spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders, waiting for her to send the next hit squad. We can't live like that, Evan. We have to finish it." "How?" "We make the wolves eat each other," I said. I sat back down at the terminal. I needed to plant a seed of paranoia so deep it would shatter their alliance instantly. I opened a drafting program. I created a fake email chain. I made it look like it was sent from Morgan's private, encrypted account to the district attorney's office. Subject: immunity deal regarding Dominic V. Body: I have the ledgers. I can give you the full structure of the cartel and Dominic's location. All I want is full immunity and protection. I am ready to turn state's witness. It was a forgery, but it looked perfect. It had her digital signature, her tone, her cold precision. I didn't send it to the DA. I sent it directly to Dominic's phone. "Sent," I whispered. An hour later, I was parked 3 streets away from the Spire, the luxury high-rise where Morgan and Dominic were hiding. I couldn't get into the building. The security was military-grade, but I didn't need to get in physically. I had already hacked the building's smart home network. I put on my headset. The audio feed from Penthouse 4B crackled to life. "What is this?" Dominic's voice boomed through my headphones. He sounded drunk and terrified. "What is what?" "Stop shouting, Dom. I'm trying to fix the transfer routing," Morgan's voice replied. She sounded calm, dismissive. The contrast between them was sharp. "This," Dominic roared. There was a sound of a phone being smashed onto a table. "You sent an email to the DA? You're selling me out. What are you talking about?" "I didn't email anyone." Morgan snapped. "You're paranoid." "Paranoid? I have the screenshot. It's from your secure server. Immunity deal. Dominic's location. You're planning to hand me over to the feds so you can fly off to. Where is it?" "Zurich." There was a pause. A long, deadly silence. I held my breath. This was the pivot point. "How did you know about Zurich?" Morgan asked. Her voice had dropped. The calmness was gone, replaced by a sharp, icy edge. "So it's true." Dominic sounded like a wounded animal. "You bought a ticket." "Just one. I checked the flight logs after I got the email. You were going to leave me here to rot. You're a liability, Dominic." Morgan screamed. The mask finally slipped. "You messed up the hit. You let Hunter escape. You let a 16-year-old boy dig a hole instead of just putting a bullet in him. You are sloppy. If I stay with you, I go to prison. If I leave, I survive. It's simple math. Simple math." Dominic laughed, a dark, dangerous sound. "I killed for you. I built this territory for you. And you think you can just walk away?" "I own you," Morgan hissed. "I own the accounts. I own the contacts. Without me, you're just a thug in a cheap suit. You touch me, and the money vanishes forever." The encryption keys are in my head. I listened, a grim satisfaction settling in my chest. They were tearing each other apart. The empire wasn't built on loyalty. It was built on leverage. And I had just removed the fulcrum. "I don't need the money if I'm in jail," Dominic growled. "And I'm not going to jail alone." I heard the distinct sound of a gun being drawn from a holster. Leather sliding against leather. "Put the gun away, Dom," Morgan said, her voice trembling slightly for the first time. "No," Dominic said. "We're going to take a ride. We're going to the airfield. But we're not going to Zurich. We're going to meet a friend of mine. A judge. Judge Julian. My ears perked up. I remembered the name from my research, but I hadn't connected him to the inner circle yet. Dominic was calling in his insurance policy. Julian can't help you, Morgan said. Julian owes me, Dominic corrected. He'll get us out of the city, but you're coming with me as collateral. If the feds show up, you're the first one taking a bullet. You're making a mistake, Morgan warned. The mistake was trusting you, Dominic spat. Get your coat. The beige one. We're leaving. I heard the door of the penthouse slam shut. I ripped the headphones off and started the van. They were on the move. They were flushing themselves out of the fortress. Dominic was panicking, dragging Morgan to a secondary location. This, Judge Julian. This was my chance. I grabbed the radio handset and called the bunker. Evan, I said. They're moving. I'm following them. Where are they going? To a judge, I said, merging into traffic. It looks like the corruption goes higher than the police. But they're fighting. They're distracted. Be careful, Dad, Evan said. If they have a judge, they have the law on their side. Not tonight, I said, gripping the steering wheel. Tonight, the only law is gravity, and they are about to fall. I tailed Dominic's black SUV from a safe distance. I didn't use headlights. I used the street lamps and the ambient glow of the city. They were heading toward the old industrial district, near the rail yards. It was a desolate place, a graveyard of rusty trains and empty warehouses. Perfect for an ambush. But something felt wrong. Dominic was erratic, swerving between lanes, but he was heading into a dead end. Why would a judge meet them there? Unless it was a trap. Not for me. For them. I checked my weapon. One magazine left in the pistol. The rifle was in the back. I was walking into a crossfire between a mob boss, a traitorous wife, and a corrupt legal official. I took a deep breath. This was the work. This was the mission. End of the line, Morgan. I whispered to the windshield. I accelerated, closing the gap. The time for shadows was over. I kept the van's headlights off, rolling silently over the cracked pavement of the industrial sector. Ahead, the taillights of Dominic's SUV were two red eyes in the darkness, leading me deeper into the maze of rusted shipping containers and abandoned train cars. They were heading to a meet. Dominic was desperate. He was running to Judge Julian, thinking a corrupt gavel could save him from a bullet. He didn't realize that while he was playing checkers, I had already flipped the board. I reached into my vest and pulled out a burner phone. I didn't dial 911. The local police were compromised. Half of them were probably on Dominic's payroll. I dialed a number I hadn't used in 5 years. It rang twice. This line is dead, a woman's voice answered. Sharp. Suspicious. Not anymore, Eliza, I said. There was a pause. Eliza was a former federal prosecutor, a woman who had been forced into early retirement because she refused to stop hunting the city's organized crime ring. She was the only lawyer I knew who hated criminals more than I did. Hunter. Her voice softened, but only slightly. You're supposed to be a construction worker. I heard you were dead. The chatter on the police scanner says you killed your family. The family is alive. The chatter is a lie, I said, keeping my eyes on the SUV ahead. I'm sending you a data packet right now. Check your secure email. I hit send on the laptop sitting on the passenger seat. The files I had stolen from Morgan's safe, the black ledgers, the bank transfers, the recording of Dominic admitting to the murders, flew through the encrypted signal. What is this? Eliza asked after a moment, the sound of typing furious in the background. It's the head of the snake, I said. Morgan, Dominic, and Judge Julian. They're all in bed together. Morgan has been laundering the money through First City Bank. Dominic moves the product. Julian covers the legal tracks. My God, Eliza breathed. This connects the Port Authority bribes to the courthouse. This is a RICO case wrapped in a bow. Hunter, this is enough to bury them for 3 lifetimes. I don't want them buried in court yet, I said coldly. I want them stripped naked first. I want their assets frozen. I want their warehouses raided. I want them to know they have nowhere to run. I can make the call, Eliza said, her voice shifting into professional gear. I still have friends at the State Bureau. If I drop this on the director's desk, they'll bypass the local precinct. They'll send the tactical teams. Do it, I ordered. They're at the rail yards now, meeting Julian. But start hitting their safe houses. Squeeze them, Eliza. Make them panic. Consider it done, she said. Hunter, bring it home. Don't die on me. Not today. I hung up. The legal assault had begun. I wasn't just a guy with a gun anymore. I was the tip of a federal spear. I parked the van behind a derelict locomotive and moved on foot. The rain had started again, a cold drizzle that slicked the iron rails. I climbed up a rusted ladder to the top of a grain silo, settling into a sniper's perch. Below me, in a clearing between two stacks of coal, Dominic's SUV had stopped. The headlights cut through the gloom, illuminating a black sedan parked waiting for them. Dominic stepped out, dragging Morgan by the arm. She stumbled, her heels breaking on the gravel. She looked wrecked, her expensive coat muddy, her face pale. The door of the sedan opened. A man stepped out. He was older, silver-haired, wearing a trench coat over a tuxedo. Judge Julian. I adjusted the scope of my rifle. I could see Julian's face clearly. He looked annoyed, checking his gold watch. You're late, Dominic. Julian's voice carried up to me. And you brought her? I told you to come alone. She's the problem, Julian. Dominic shouted, shoving Morgan forward. She fell onto the wet stones. She froze the accounts. She tried to sell me to the DA? I need you to fix this. I need new passports, and I need a flight out of a private strip. Tonight. Julian looked down at Morgan with disgust. Get up, Morgan. You look pathetic. Morgan scrambled to her feet, wiping mud from her face. She regained a shred of her composure, her eyes darting between the two men. Julian, listen to me. Dominic is compromised. He botched the hit on Hunter. Hunter is alive. He's coming for us. I know he's alive, Julian said smoothly. Why do you think I'm here? Julian reached into his coat. Dominic flinched, reaching for his own gun. But Julian didn't pull a weapon. He pulled out a phone. I just got a call from the clerk's office, Julian said, his voice icy. State police just kicked down the doors of your warehouse on 5th Street. They're raiding the Velvet Room as we speak. And Morgan, he turned his cold gaze on my wife. Your passport has been flagged by the Department of Homeland Security. If you step foot in an airport, you'll be in handcuffs before you clear the metal detector. Morgan gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. No, that's impossible. I encrypted everything. Someone gave them the keys, Julian said. He looked up, scanning the darkness of the rail yard. He sensed it. He knew I was out there. Hunter, Morgan whispered. She looked around wildly, her eyes wide with terror. He did this. He's destroying everything. He's not just destroying it, Dominic snarled. He's toying with us. Up on the silo, I keyed my radio, broadcasting on the frequency I knew their security team monitored. You're right, Dominic, I said. My voice boomed from the SUV's open speaker system. All three of them froze. I'm not just watching. I continued, my voice distorted but clear. I'm the judge now, Julian. You're not the law. You're just another criminal in a suit. Show yourself. Dominic screamed, spinning in circles, aiming his gun at the shadows. Start running, I said. In the distance, the wail of sirens began to rise. Not one or two, dozens. Eliza had come through. The state police were closing in. Julian's face went white. I'm not going down for you idiots. He turned to get back in his sedan. No, Dominic roared. He fired a shot into the air. Nobody leaves. If I burn, we all burn. It was chaos. The legal pressure cooker had exploded. They were trapped in a box of their own making, and the walls were closing in. I watched through the scope, my finger hovering over the trigger. I didn't need to shoot them yet. I needed them to turn on each other completely. The raid is here, I whispered to myself. Now let's see who breaks first. The sound of sirens wailing in the distance was usually a sound of relief, a signal that help was coming. But in the rail yard, under the cold, relentless rain. The sirens sounded like a countdown clock. Judge Julian wasn't waiting for the clock to hit 0. He scrambled toward his sedan, his polished shoes slipping on the wet gravel. "You are on your own, Dominic," Julian shouted, reaching for the door handle. "I'm not going to prison for your incompetence." Bang! Dominic didn't hesitate. He fired a single shot into the rear tire of Julian's black sedan. The car hissed, tilting awkwardly as the rubber shredded. "I said nobody leaves." Dominic screamed, his face twisted into a mask of pure, feral desperation. He leveled the gun at the judge's chest. "You think you can walk away? You signed the warrants. You took the bribes. If I go down, I'm taking every single one of you with me." Morgan was crouched behind the wheel of the SUV, her hands over her ears, sobbing. She was watching her empire crumble in real time. The money was frozen. The police were minutes away. Her partners were turning on each other. From my perch on the grain silo, I watched the scene through the crosshairs. It was over. I just had to wait. The state police tactical teams would breach the perimeter in less than 3 minutes. They would arrest Julian, Dominic, and Morgan. I would hand over the evidence, and I would go pick up Evan. "Hunter." Dominic's voice roared up toward my hiding spot. He was spinning around, looking at the towers, looking at the shadows. "I know you're up there. I know you're watching." I didn't answer. I let the silence terrify him. "You think you won?" Dominic laughed, a manic, jagged sound that echoed off the metal shipping containers. "You think because you called the cops, this is over? You forgot who you're dealing with. You forgot that Morgan knows everything about you." My finger tightened on the trigger. What was he talking about? Dominic holstered his gun and walked to the back of the SUV. He popped the trunk. "Morgan told me you have a soft spot," Dominic yelled. "She told me you'd let the world burn to save your family. Well, Evan is gone. But you have other family, don't you?" He reached into the trunk and dragged someone out by their hair. My heart stopped. The air left my lungs as if I'd been kicked by a mule. It was a woman. She was bound with duct tape, her head covered in a burlap sack. She was kicking, struggling against Dominic's grip. He ripped the sack off her head. "Clara, my little sister." She was gasping for air, terror written across her face. She had a bruise on her cheek. She looked up, blinking in the harsh headlights, confused and terrified. "Clara," I screamed, forgetting the radio, forgetting the stealth. The word ripped out of my throat. "There he is." Dominic pointed up at the silo. He grabbed Clara, wrapping his arm around her neck and pressing the barrel of his gun to her temple. "Come down, Hunter. Come down right now, or I paint the gravel with her brains." "Don't do it, Hunter." Clara screamed, her voice breaking. "Run. Just run." Dominic pistol-whipped her. She crumpled to her knees, groaning. "Stop," I warned. Morgan stepped out from behind the SUV. She looked at Clara, then up at where I was hiding. A look of twisted vindication crossed her face. She wiped her eyes and stood up straighter. This was her idea. I knew it. She knew I wouldn't come out for money. She knew I wouldn't come out for pride. She knew the only thing that could drag me out of the dark was blood. "You have 30 seconds, Hunter," Morgan yelled, her voice shrill but steady. "The police are almost here. If we see a single flashing light before you get down here, she dies. We need a hostage to get out of here. You're going to trade places with her." I slammed my fist against the metal railing of the silo. I had played it perfectly. I had checkmated them, but they had flipped the board. I grabbed my radio. "Eliza, abort. Abort the breach." "What?" Eliza's voice crackled in my ear. "The teams are 30 seconds out. We have them boxed in. They have a hostage," I hissed, rapidly descending the ladder. "They have my sister. If the police roll up with sirens, they execute her. Tell your teams to hold the perimeter. Do not engage. Do you copy? Do not engage." "Hunter, I can't just. If my sister dies, Eliza, I will declare war on the entire department," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Hold them back. Give me 5 minutes." I didn't wait for an answer. I ripped the earpiece out and dropped it. I hit the ground running. I didn't run away. I ran toward them. I checked my gear as I moved through the maze of train cars. The rifle was useless now. I couldn't risk a shot with Clara that close to Dominic. I slung it over my back and drew the pistol. I stepped out into the clearing. The rain was coming down harder now, washing away the mud, but it couldn't wash away the sin of this night. "I'm here," I said. Dominic spun around, keeping Clara between us as a human shield. Morgan stood behind him, holding her own small pistol now. Even Judge Julian had picked up a gun, probably Dominic's spare, and was leveling it at me. 3 guns, 1 hostage, and me. "Drop the weapon," Dominic ordered. I crouched slowly and placed my pistol on the wet ground. I stood back up, raising my hands. "Let her go, Dominic," I said, my eyes locked on his. "You want me. You have me. She's a florist. She has nothing to do with this." "She's leverage," Morgan said, stepping forward. She looked me up and down, taking in the tactical vest, the scars, the cold look in my eyes. "I always wondered," she mused. "I always wondered why you were so quiet. Why you never talked about your past. I thought you were just empty. But you were hiding a monster, weren't you?" "We both were," I replied. "I just kept mine on a leash. You let yours run the bank." "Shut up," Dominic shouted. "Get on your knees. Hands behind your head." I slowly knelt on the sharp gravel. The sirens had stopped. Eliza had listened. The silence that followed was heavier than the noise. "We're taking him," Dominic said to Julian. "He's our ticket out. The cops won't shoot if we have him." "And the girl?" Julian asked, wiping rain from his glasses. Dominic looked down at Clara. She was sobbing quietly, looking at me with an apology in her eyes. "Leave her," Morgan said. "She slows us down." "No," Dominic grinned. "No loose ends. We kill her. We take him." He shifted his aim from Clara's head to her chest. Time stopped. I looked at the distance. 20 feet. Too far to lunge. I looked at Morgan. She was looking at Clara. For a split second, I saw hesitation. Clara had been her bridesmaid. Clara had helped her pick out her wedding dress. "Morgan," I said, my voice low and urgent. "If he pulls that trigger, there is no deal. There is no prison. I will tear his throat out with my teeth. Call him off." Morgan looked at Dominic. "Dom, don't. I'm the boss now." Dominic screamed. His finger tightened on the trigger. I didn't wait for Morgan. I didn't wait for miracles. I moved. It wasn't a conscious decision. It was muscle memory. It was the Reaper taking over the controls. I reached into my boot, grabbed the handle of the combat knife, and threw it in a single, fluid motion. It wasn't aimed at Dominic. He was behind Clara. I couldn't hit him. I threw it at the floodlight behind them. Shatter. The bulb exploded. The clearing plunged into semi-darkness, lit only by the distant ambient glow of the city. "I can't see," Julian yelled, firing blindly. I rolled forward, diving into the mud. "Kill him," Dominic screamed. The bait had been taken, but they didn't realize that when you bait a trap for a tiger, you have to be ready when the tiger breaks free. The darkness was my ally. It was the only friend I had left. When the floodlight shattered, the rail yard plunged into a chaotic gray gloom, lit only by the distant orange haze of the city skyline. For them, it was blindness. For me, it was just a change in contrast. "I can't see him," Dominic screamed, firing his weapon wildly into the empty air. Bang, bang, bang. The muzzle flashes were strobe lights, freezing moments of terror in the rain. I didn't go for Dominic. Not yet. I stayed low, moving on the balls of my feet, silent as smoke. I reached Clara first. She was curled in a ball on the wet gravel, paralyzed by the noise. I grabbed her collar and dragged her 2 feet to the left, shoving her into the recess of a rusted wheel set on a train car. "Stay down," I whispered into her ear. "Cover your ears. Close your eyes." She nodded, trembling violently. I turned back to the kill zone. Dominic was spinning in circles, his breathing ragged and loud. Morgan was backing away, her small pistol shaking in her grip. Judge Julian was crouching by his sedan, trying to open the door, trying to flee. "Morgan," Where is he? Dominic roared. I don't know, she shrieked. I moved. I stepped out of the shadows directly behind Dominic. I didn't use a weapon. I didn't need one. I kicked the back of his knee hard. The joint buckled with a sickening crunch. Dominic howled and hit the ground. His gun clattered away on the stones. Before he could scramble up, I was on him. I grabbed his wrist, the one he had used to hold the gun against my sister's head, and twisted it until it snapped. He screamed again, a high, pathetic sound that was cut short as I drove my knee into his solar plexus. Stay, I growled. Hunter. Morgan's voice cut through the ring. I spun around in a crouch. Morgan was standing 10 feet away. She had her gun leveled at my chest. Her mascara was running, her hair plastered to her skull. She looked like a ghost of the woman I married. Don't move, she sobbed, her hands shaking so hard the gun barrel was waving in circles. I'll shoot you, Hunter. I swear to God, I'll do it. I stood up slowly, ignoring Dominic groaning in the mud at my feet. I looked at my wife. You won't, I said calmly. Why? She screamed, hysterical. Because we loved each other? Because of the last 20 years? No, I said. Because you're out of bullets. She froze. She looked down at the gun. She hadn't fired a single shot, but the slide was locked back. She had never chambered a round properly. She didn't know how guns worked. She only knew how bank accounts worked. She let out a strangled cry of frustration and threw the gun at me. It bounced harmlessly off my tactical vest. It's over, Morgan, I said, stepping toward her. No. Judge Julian's voice boomed. I looked past Morgan. Julian had opened the trunk of his sedan. He wasn't getting a tire iron. He was pulling out a shotgun. I am a federal judge, Julian shouted, his face red with exertion and panic. He racked the pump action. I am not going to prison because of a construction worker and a housewife. He wasn't aiming at me. He was aiming at Morgan. This was the twist. The loyalty didn't exist. Julian knew that if Morgan lived, she would talk. She was the weak link. She had the encryption keys. She knew where the bodies were buried. If he killed her, he could claim he was a hostage who fought back. He could claim he was the hero. Goodbye, Morgan, Julian sneered. Morgan screamed, freezing in place. She stared down the black barrel of the shotgun, realizing finally, fatally, that she was the liability now. I couldn't let him do it. Not because I loved her, that part of me was dead, but because she was the evidence. She was the key to clearing my name and saving Evan's future. If she died, the truth died with her. I didn't think. I lunged. Drop it, I roared, sprinting across the gap. Julian pulled the trigger. Boom. The shotgun blast tore through the air, but I was faster. I tackled Morgan, slamming my shoulder into her waist and driving her into the mud just as the buckshot shredded the air where she had been standing. We hit the ground hard. Morgan gasped, winded. I rolled off her instantly, coming up to a knee. Julian racked the slide again. Click-clack. You idiot, Julian yelled. Let her die? It's the only way out. He swung the shotgun toward me. I reached for the knife I had thrown earlier. It was gone in the darkness. I had no weapon. My pistol was on the ground near Clara. Julian smiled. A cruel, politician smile. Case dismissed. Suddenly, a red laser appeared on Julian's forehead, then another on his chest, then 3 more on his heart. Drop the weapon. A voice amplified by a megaphone shook the ground. Federal agents. Drop it now. Julian froze. He looked down at the red dots dancing on his tuxedo shirt. He looked up at the grain silos, at the warehouse roofs. The perimeter lights flooded on, blinding, white LED arrays from tactical trucks that had silently rolled up while we were fighting. Eliza hadn't retreated. She had advanced. Judge Julian Vance, the voice boomed. Place the weapon on the ground and put your hands on your head. We have you surrounded. Julian looked at the shotgun. He looked at the police. For a second, I thought he might try it. I saw the suicide in his eyes. Then, the cowardice won. He dropped the shotgun. It splashed into a puddle. He slowly raised his shaking hands into the air. I let out a breath I felt like I'd been holding for 2 days. I stood up, mud dripping from my vest. I looked down at Morgan. She was lying in the dirt, shivering, staring up at me. She looked small, broken. "You saved me," she whispered, confused. "Why?" I looked at her with zero emotion. No hate, no love, just nothing. "I didn't save you," I said coldly. "I preserved the evidence." I turned my back on her and walked toward the wheel set where Clara was hiding. "It's okay, Clara," I called out softly. "It's done. You can come out now." Agents swarmed the yard. Men in heavy armor sprinted past me, zip-tying Dominic, handcuffing Julian, and hauling Morgan up from the mud. I sat down on the bumper of a train car, the adrenaline finally draining out of my system, leaving just the pain of my broken ribs and the throbbing of my thumb. One of the agents, a tall man with an FBI windbreaker, walked up to me. He looked at my gear, then at the carnage in the yard. "Hunter," he asked. "Yeah," I said. "Eliza sent us." "You secured the scene." He looked at Morgan being shoved into a cruiser. "We have the ledgers you sent, but we need a statement." "You'll get it," I said, standing up. "But first, I have a phone call to make." I pulled out my burner phone. I dialed the bunker. "Evan," I said when he picked up, "pack your bag. I'm coming to get you." "Is it over?" Evan asked. "The fighting is over," I said, watching the flashing lights of the police cruisers reflect off the wet rails. "Now comes the justice." The flashing lights of the police cruisers didn't look like panic anymore. They looked like a cleanup crew. I stood by the ambulance, a paramedic wrapping my ribs in a fresh compression bandage. My thumb was splinted, throbbing in time with my heartbeat. But I didn't feel the pain. I only felt the weight lifting. A black sedan pulled up, not a judge's car, but an unmarked federal vehicle. The back door opened, and a teenage boy jumped out before the car even fully stopped. "Dad!" Evan sprinted across the wet pavement. He hit me hard, wrapping his arms around my waist, burying his face in my tactical vest. He was shaking. I winced as he squeezed my broken ribs, but I didn't pull away. I hugged him back with my good arm, resting my chin on his head. "I got you," I whispered into his hair. "I told you. I got you." Over his shoulder, I saw them leading Morgan away. She was handcuffed, flanked by 2 female agents. She stopped for a second, looking across the parking lot at us. She saw her son hugging the husband she tried to kill. She opened her mouth to speak, maybe to scream, maybe to beg, but the agent pushed her forward. "Keep moving, ma'am." She disappeared into the back of a transport van. The doors slammed shut with a final, metallic thud. That was the last time Evan ever saw his mother. The seasons changed quickly after that night. We didn't stick around to watch the leaves fall in the city. The sentencing hearing happened on the first day of winter. The courthouse was packed. It seemed the whole state wanted to see the downfall of Judge Julian Vance and his crime ring. I didn't wear a suit. I wore a simple flannel shirt and jeans. I sat in the back row. I didn't need to testify. The ledgers I stole and the recording from the rail yard did all the talking. Dominic broke first. In a desperate attempt to avoid the death penalty, he spilled everything. He detailed every drug shipment, every bribe, and every murder. He pointed the finger directly at Julian and Morgan. Then came the verdicts. Judge Julian Vance. Life in prison without parole for racketeering, conspiracy to commit murder, and corruption. The man who used to bang the gavel was dragged out screaming that it was a mistake. Dominic, 3 consecutive life sentences. He didn't scream. He just glared at me as he was led away. I didn't glare back. I just nodded. And then Morgan, my wife, the mother of my child. She stood up when the judge read her sentence. She looked thin, her hair dull, her designer clothes replaced by an orange jumpsuit. She tried to look at the gallery, searching for a friendly face. She found none. For the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, money laundering, and RICO violations, you are sentenced to 50 years in a federal penitentiary. 50 years. She would be an old woman, if she survived, by the time she saw the sky as a free person. She slumped into her chair, covering her face with her hands. She didn't cry for us. She cried for her lost future. I stood up and walked out of the courtroom before they even handcuffed her. I didn't need to see the end. I had already written it. We didn't go back to the house. The bank foreclosed on it, and honestly, I wanted them to have it. It was a monument to a lie. Instead, I cashed out my old military pension, funds I hadn't touched in 2 decades, and we drove north. Far north. We found a cabin near a small lake in Montana. It needs work. The roof leaks when it rains hard, and the porch railing is loose, but it's honest work. It's quiet work. I was on the porch this morning, drinking coffee, watching the mist roll off the water. My thumb still clicks when it rains, a permanent reminder of the night in the woods. The screen door creaked open. Evan walked out. He's taller now, filling out his shoulders. The terror that used to live in his eyes is gone, replaced by a quiet resilience. He's not the soft kid who dug his own grave anymore. He's a young man who knows the value of loyalty. "You okay, Dad?" he asked, leaning on the railing next to me. "I'm good," I said, taking a sip of the coffee. "Just thinking about her." "No," I said truthfully. "I was thinking about the fishing gear. I think the bass are biting today." Evan smiled. It was a real smile. "I'll get the rods." He went back inside. I looked out at the tree line. I'm not the assassin anymore. I'm not the ghost. I buried those men back in the rail yard along with the shell casings. But I kept the lessons. I learned that family isn't blood. It's not a marriage certificate. Family is the people who stand next to you when the shovel hits the dirt. Family is the people who don't run when the darkness comes. Morgan chased a life of gold and ended up in a cage of iron. I chased a quiet life, lost it, fought for it, and earned it back. I put my coffee cup down and looked at my hands. They were scarred, rough, and older, but they were free. "Ready?" Evan called from the door, holding 2 fishing poles. "Ready," I said. I walked back into the warmth of the cabin, closing the door on the cold world outside. Story finished. Author's closing note. Thank you so much for staying with me until the very end of this journey. It was a heavy ride, but sometimes we have to walk through the dark to appreciate the light. I have a question for you before you go. If you were in Hunter's position, standing in that rail yard with the woman who betrayed you and tried to kill your son, would you have saved her from the shotgun blast just to see her go to prison? Or would you have let karma take its course right there? It's a hard choice. Let me know what you would have done in the comments. Also, I'd love to know where you are listening from. Whether you're watching from a busy city in the UK, a quiet town in the USA, or anywhere else in the world, drop your city or country in the comments. It's amazing to see how far our family extends. And finally, a small request. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please gently hit that like button and subscribe. It helps us bring more of these stories to life for you. What should I write next? Tell me in the comments what kind of story you want to hear next. Do you want more military revenge? Or maybe a twisted cheating spouse mystery? Or perhaps a story about sibling betrayal? Let me know exactly what you enjoy, and I will write it for you. Until then, take care of yourselves and your loved ones. See you in the next epic story.